lot of people are finding themselves scrambling to pay increased power bills.
Electricity bills.
The electric bill.
Across the country, as people open their electricity bills, gas.
The electric bill would get over $1,000.
And bills could skyrocket even more.
But, we need the electricity.
Why have power bills gotten so expensive? One of the biggest reasons is our dependence on fossil fuels, specifically gas, to generate electricity.
Electric bills may go up by more than 60%. The reason? Higher natural gas prices.
We have alternatives that are cheaper, more stable, and that don't emit climate pollution. But electric utilities or power companies have lobbied against efforts to transition to clean energy. And that lobbying is a big part of the problem. Take a look at this letter. It comes from an electric utility front group called the Edison Electric Institute. In the letter, EEI is asking the Environmental Protection Agency to weaken an important climate rule. Most people in the United States get their electricity from a member of the group that wrote this letter. Fees tacked onto their power bills paid for the lobbyists and the lawyers who wrote it. And that's a big problem, because you need electricity and you don't get a choice in who you buy it from. Electric utilities have monopolies. And those utilities spend tens of millions of dollars a year on lobbyists who are opposing clean energy. But at the same time, utilities are also spending your money on fancy ad campaigns to greenwash their image.
Together, we're building our clean energy future.
Utilities are playing a game. They're saying one thing to the public and something completely different behind closed doors with regulators. This game is part of a whole web of dark money, and it's one of the largest obstacles we face in tackling climate change. Today, we're going to get to the bottom of this game, how utilities have gotten so good at it, and how they're playing it with your money.
This all goes back to the time of Edison and Tesla.
When we first got good at generating electricity and transmitting it around so we could use it to do stuff, there was a rush to electrify the entire country, but no one was exactly sure the best way to do that.
A man named Samuel Insull, who was kind of the right-hand man of Edison, basically conceived of this bargain.
Insull was really the one that came out with this idea to grow the utility structure as one that was for profit by asking shareholders to buy parts of the company.
At the time, the best way to generate electricity was with big coal plants, which were expensive, and transmitting electricity was expensive too. To handle this, Samuel Insull proposed a system of investor-owned monopoly utilities.
These private companies would get a monopoly over the equipment to generate and transmit and distribute electricity to customers. In exchange for that monopoly, which would be granted by the state, they would submit to regulation.
Today, about 2/3 of Americans are served by investor-owned utilities. And to Insull's credit, this system definitely helped transform life in the United States by very quickly electrifying almost every household. It was also very profitable for people who owned the utilities.
The regulators are kind of the thing that's supposed to make that deal work. Regulators aren't always doing their job very well.
Insull's utility empire was worth $3 billion at its peak, and today utilities are traded along with every other company on the stock exchange.
Utilities are buys.
The more profit a utility delivers to Wall Street, that profit has to come from somewhere, and it's coming from their customers' pockets.
Here in California, where I live in PG&E, the CEO makes about $50 million a year. Meanwhile, people in my neighborhood, in my community, are seeing their power shut off because they're not able to pay their bills.
As pandemic-era protections have been lifted, millions of people have had their electricity shut off over unpaid balances. These shutoffs disproportionately target people of color who also tend to spend more of their income on power bills than white people. And as that's happening, utilities have paid out record dividends and given massive bonuses to executives.
Pretty much around every corner, the Utilities Commission ends up siding with the utilities. And we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but what we do see, our bills are still going up and they're still continuing to be negligent.
The company has a legal obligation to profit as much as it can. To secure those profits, they will spend enormous amounts of money lobbying.
Now,
breaking news from NBC4.
And that breaking news, after 7 weeks of federal court hearings, 2 Ohio politicians have been found guilty in a $60 million pay-to-play scheme.
In July of 2019, the Ohio legislature passed a sweeping energy package that forced taxpayers to fund a huge bailout for outdated coal plants and cut the state's clean energy standard. It seemed like a gift to the state's largest and most polluting utility, First Energy. Soon, we found out why.
First Energy is admitting its role in the largest bribery case in Ohio history.
First Energy had bribed the Ohio Speaker of the House to secure passage of the bill. This case received a lot of attention, but it's not the first time that utilities have tried to slow down clean energy. Utilities have invested a lot into facilities that generate power by burning fossil fuels, just like they did 100 years ago. Today, those power plants are responsible for about a quarter of US climate pollution, and that's not their only problem. Generating electricity with renewable energy is now cheaper than gas and coal. That means if utilities sped up their efforts to close fossil fuel plants and build renewables, they would cut their climate emissions, and they'd also save their customers money. It seems like an obvious decision if utilities prioritized their customers. But that's not how utilities make decisions. So instead, they team up with fossil fuel companies to protect their profits.
Investor-owned utilities, they're not beholden to customers like you and me. They're beholden to shareholders.
They want to make sure they get to own it all and not have to compete with anybody else, so they'll slow the whole thing down in service of their monopoly. They're doing quite well with the status quo, and they're very averse to changing things when they're doing well. They're not retiring coal fast enough. They're still building new gas plants, and they're not building and embracing clean energy enough, not fast enough.
In Northeast Ohio, the generation of electricity begins with coal.
Internally, utilities were talking about the risks of climate change in the early 1970s, but they spent decades funding climate denial and lobbying politicians in order to delay the transition to clean energy.
The electric utility industry has been engaged in the debate on climate change.
In 1991, utilities funded a $500,000 marketing campaign to sow doubt about climate science. They bragged about keeping the United States from joining the first international effort to limit climate change. And in 2000, utilities spent millions to elect George Bush, who rewarded them just a few months later by abandoning his pledge to make them cut climate pollution. You may have noticed that individual utilities aren't taking credit for this work. It's filtered through a web of front groups and trade associations. At the center is EEI, the largest and most powerful electric utility trade association.
It's kind of like the quarterback for all the utilities on their political agenda.
Here's a former EEI chairman.
That's my question. You think it's been proven that CO2 is the primary climate control now?
No, certainly not. Is climate change happening? Certainly. It's been happening for millennia.
Right.
That's not the issue, okay?
And EEI just got a new president. This guy, Dan Brouillette. He was a top cabinet secretary under President Trump, where he made headlines as a climate denier. And remember that Ohio scandal where people went to jail?
They also gave an award to the CEO of First Energy, like an annual award for EEI. That was the case study. That was the shining example that all of their member companies should aspire to.
And EEI is funneling your money into this web of far-right politicians and conservative dark money groups, and even supported groups behind the January 6th attacks. This has been going on for decades. And remember, it's all being done with money from your electric bill.
Yeah, I think there's something especially insidious about the fact that we're paying bills to these companies that are then turning our dollars into lobbying that makes sure that we never actually get to see affordable, clean, people-powered energy.
In hindsight, it seems like the system was always set up this way. Utilities have an exclusive monopoly to sell a service that is essential for modern life. That's a recipe to make a tremendous amount of money. And to get that money, utility executives have used every tool at their disposal to influence the regulators, the one thing keeping them from getting incredibly rich by taking advantage of customers. There was a problem, though. Their climate denial stopped working.
Green New Deal!
Hundreds of thousands took to the streets of New York today, demonstrating for action on climate change.
Climate change really is a big issue for voters across the board.
There was a huge movement growing, calling for climate action from leaders and regulators. So utilities needed a new strategy.
Con Edison is committed to providing 100% clean, renewable energy to our customers.
Avangrid is leading America's clean energy transition.
We're a leader in the U.S. in clean energy.
We've taken bold steps to become the clean energy leader in Michigan.
Utilities, they don't need to advertise, right? Utilities aren't convincing you to buy their product. You have no choice. So the real reason utilities advertise is to bolster their image, and it all is to serve their political goal.
Today, most utilities are happy to tell you that climate change is real. But you don't need to worry, they're on it. And they definitely don't need any new regulations. And yes, EEI is leading this pivot. Listen to what they said at their conference a few years ago.
So we have the actual working of the grid on one side, and our regulators and our policymakers with whom we can have these more complicated discussions. And then we have our customers who, quite frankly, don't care. How do we get customers to trust us that we are moving in the right direction, we are doing the right things?
We're going to need some help on messaging. I think that's a real opportunity for us.
I think it goes to show that they've got really big budgets and they're very smart. You know, they're playing the long game. That being said, I think it's quite easy to recognize the real negligence.
Record high temperatures are expected to continue this year.
Unsurprisingly, this greenwashing is especially common in places where we know voters prioritize climate action. Take SDG&E in San Diego, or PG&E in San Francisco, or Con Ed in New York. All of those utilities are members of EEI, which means whatever they say publicly, they're funding climate denial. And this isn't just something that they used to do, it's happening right now.
Today, the Environmental Protection Agency laid out its latest move to cut the greenhouse gases that are driving climate change.
EPA's power plant carbon rules are the agency's most effective tool to cut climate pollution. It's the sort of popular, common sense climate action that utilities advertising suggests they'd support. But if you've made it this far into the video, you probably won't be surprised to learn that EEI has come out in full force against the rules. The gist of EEI's argument is that the rules are too onerous, too difficult, and too expensive. Except utilities have made this exact argument before. The Obama administration had their own climate rules called the Clean Power Plan. And utilities made basically the same case then and supported an effort by Republican states to overturn them. But now we know they weren't telling the truth because they met the goals of the Clean Power Plan a full decade early. Large majorities of Americans support the EPA rules. Frankly, they support doing much more to fight the climate crisis than just these rules, but they definitely support making the rules as strong as possible. But pretty much all of those people are paying electric bills, and in many cases, some of their money is going to fund this letter of opposition.
And so when we look at trade groups like the Edison Electric Institute, it's really scary that they have so much impact on the ways in which legislation is passed, where my bill and the bill of everyone in my community is going to fund their lobbying efforts.
But what if we could start to change that?
Starting on Monday, new laws will be going into effect to help Coloradans save money on their energy bills.
This is a really exciting new trend. 3 states have each passed a law protecting customers by making it illegal for utilities to embed their political costs into customers' bills.
Another new law increases oversight of Connecticut's utility companies.
If a utility is lobbying or advertising that just serves their public relations or spending money on political trade associations, they can't charge customers for those things.
Under these new laws, utility investors will still be allowed to use their profits to pay for any of these political expenses. But a huge part of how EEI and the utility industry have grown so politically powerful is by passing on their lobbying costs to ordinary people through higher bills. Taking that away is a huge step towards reigning in their power.
For customers in those places, they can at least know that they aren't being conscripted into the utilities' political machines, and it will maybe slow down utilities' ability to, have a free ATM machine for how much they spend on that stuff.
At least 7 other states have already introduced laws similar to what's been enacted in Colorado, Maine, and Connecticut. Because no one wants higher energy bills, and they really don't want those bills going to fund lobbying. And when people find out that their money is being used to slow down progress towards cleaner, cheaper energy and to boost utility profits, it galvanizes them to fight back.
I think it's a great idea to restrict the lobbying power of utilities. And I think it's sort of a yes and approach, right? I think we need to restrict, and also we must empower, and empower specifically communities and community power.
All of this has real consequences. People dying because of utility negligence, families who don't know how they're going to pay their bills, and the United States' outsized contribution to the worsening climate crisis. Utilities are good at their game, and they've been playing it for a long time. Ratepayer protection laws are just one step, one power-up to shift things back in favor of ordinary people. But it's an important one in standing up to utilities' false narrative, because utilities are lying, just like they have been for decades. The truth is, we deserve clean, reliable energy, and we deserve to have a say in making those decisions, not just lobbyists. And it's more important now than ever that ordinary people take back the power they deserve. Thank you so much for sticking with this important story to the end. If you made it this far and you want to learn more, you should sign up for our email list at the link in the description. That's where we'll keep you up to date on the world of climate policy and connect you with meaningful actions that will have an impact. It's also the best way to support our work. Thanks to David and Selena for participating in this video, and thank you for watching.